Welcome, warm welcome to everyone, all the folks who are here in person, all the folks who are here online. This is the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma, and in accord with our new schedule, we will have about half an hour, maybe 25 minutes to half an hour of guided meditation. Then I'll offer a Dhamma talk, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and reflections and comments at the end. And of course, a final dedication of merit. Hey, Jesse. And just a couple of announcements also before we get started. So on Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time, I'm going to be presenting my art history thesis on early Buddhist bronzes and what the impact they may have had on practice. And that's a drop-in. Everyone's welcome. You can just use the same link that you used to come on board today. And also next Sunday, we'll have the fundamentals group gathering for folks who are in the fundamentals class. And we'll also have the brunch after the talk. But starting this week, we're going to have tea and cookies, and every week after the Dhamma talk. And folks who are online, you'll just have to provide your own tea and cookies. I'm sorry. But yeah, so that's what's happening next week. And there's a new activity that is on the calendar for August. So for the first time in many years, I will be co-teaching with Ayananda Bodhi. I lived at Aloka Vihara with her and the other Ayas for years. And we are going to be offering a program on the second and the third foundations of mindfulness as a fundraiser for Buddhist Global Relief, where I'm on the board and she's on the Sangha Council. We are both on the Sangha Council. So just so you know, registration is open for that. And with that, I think we'll move on to today's meditation. And yeah, I think I'd like to offer a meditation on the 4 elements. And we're going to do it as a all body awareness for each element rather than doing a scan. But just to say, the part of this is to have you have a sense, begin to have a sense for different ways that you can perceive your body, what's going on in your body at any given moment. So establishing your meditation posture. I like to begin with just a bit of rocking from side to side, from front to back, just releasing any tendency to lean toward one side or the other. And then allowing the body to come into a balanced position. relaxing any tension that you can release in this moment. Perhaps noticing the breath, breathing the body, and just allowing it to have its natural rhythms. Softening the eyes and softening the mouth. And now opening the attention to the whole body at once. The whole body from head to toe. And becoming aware of the body as the earth element. You can sense that in the firmness, the stability of the body. Every cell pervaded by earth. We are carbon-based beings. And now a shift. Still aware of the whole body from head to toe. Now shifting to the water element. Every cell in the body is pervaded by water. And as you become aware of the body as pervaded by water, you might be aware of those qualities, the flowing, the softening, the smoothing of water element. Aware of the softening of water in every cell of the body. And now one more shift. Still aware of the whole body, from your toes to the crown of your head. Aware of the fire element. The warmth of the body. Our body is naturally producing heat. That's why we call it burning calories. Even the heartbeat and all the activity in your brain, that's fire element. Aware of the fire element in every cell of the body. And another shift to the fourth and final element for today, the air element. Oxygen in every cell of the body. Becoming aware of the lightness, the spaciousness of this body as air element. And now, in these last few minutes of the meditation, turning to observe the mind and mental activity. Just checking in on the state of the mind, having tuned in to the elements in the body. my friends. So now you all have tuned into your fire element enough. We'll put the air conditioning back on. Beautiful. So let me bring up the chant. So I'm going to begin with the homage to the Triple Gem, as usual, and everyone is welcome to chant along. This is really just a beautiful reminder of the source of the teachings and the way in which the teachings come to us, continue to be present in the world. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So it's often said that there are two main aspects of Buddhism: wisdom and compassion. And Buddhism is not one tradition. It is many, many dozens of traditions. Somebody recently said maybe 1,000 different traditions extant today. I think if there's anything that can be said about all of them, it might be that they are all based in wisdom and compassion. And wisdom means knowing the truths of our lives, not just one truth, but the many truths that are expressed as this life, as what we see in the world. Knowing them, seeing them, experiencing them clearly. And compassion is about the awareness that there is dukkha, there is this painful or suffering or unsatisfactory or unresolved nature of our lives, that experience is universal, and that we can still alleviate that. We can still have the intention and take action to alleviate suffering and pain where we find it. But actually, this separation is, oh, you could say, it's a skillful means, it's a convenient way of speaking. Because truly, compassion must be based in wisdom. The compassionate knowing of the state of the world is based in wisdom and that clarity of seeing. The two are inseparable. We look around and we see folks in the world who are hungry or who are impoverished or unhoused or in the middle of war or oppressed in some way. We might actually just experience suffering in our neighbors and our family members who are expressing those difficulties in various ways. We might experience the suffering in ourselves. We might know our own state of dissatisfaction or painful feeling around the experiences of our life. And being willing to see that, to hear that, to know that is itself wisdom. That is the place where we start. It is for that reason, in fact, I would suggest, or that's one of the reasons why the Buddha describes wisdom as one of the basic human faculties, one of the basic human tools, if you will, instruments that we have for walking this path. In that sense, you could say no one is devoid of wisdom. Everyone must have at least some spark of it. So we look in our own hearts, we look at our dear loved ones, we look at the whole world, and we see what's happening. We see the truths of dukkha, and that we're all grappling with this. And sometimes it seems like some people are not actually suffering too much. And that's always an interesting phenomena. Even as some person I can remember in my life, some person who was a longtime practitioner who said to me that they felt that they didn't have any suffering at all in their life. And I thought, wow, that cannot be true. It might be that the suffering is more subtle, or that it is allayed for a moment or for a period of time. But there has to be, there is something that is kind of unresolved. And I'll tell you an example of this. I was talking with some folks, this is a while back, I was living in Berkeley, and I was talking with some folks and about their neighborhood. I lived there in Berkeley, and I was talking about what it was like to live in Berkeley again after I'd been away for a while. And these folks are talking about their neighborhood, and they lived in this neighborhood with these big houses and what they thought was very peaceful place for the most part. But then what happened was that there started to be a lot of robberies in the neighborhood. And so they were worried about their things. And they were all the time worried about their things. And so this led to a lot of difficulty because they started to become obsessed about what to do when you have to be away. This is before zooming into the office. You had to be away during the day. And they were constantly worried about their things. And so they thought, So one of their neighbors said, well, you should just get a dog. You just get a nice big dog, and the dog will, prevent any burglars from wanting to come to your house. And this person thought about it for a while, and they said, no, I don't really want to have a dog. I don't like dogs that much, and I really don't want to have a dog. So that's not a good solution. But I hear that there is this machine that you can get, which has like a motion detector in it, and then it barks like a dog. So then you put that behind your front door, and that prevents people from coming. And so this person bought this machine of the barking dog, and they had it there at their front door. And that drove them crazy. It drove them crazy, and it drove the neighbors crazy, because the barking machine would bark at everything, would bark at the leaves falling off the trees or whatever. And I thought to myself, wow, this is the dukkha of having things. This is the dukkha of having things that you're so worried about losing, that you destroy the peace of your neighborhood with a barking dog machine. So people have all sorts of, I would say it's the way that people experience their lives is unknowable to us, right? Dogen said it this way. He said, only a fish knows a fish's heart. Only a fish knows a fish's heart. It means I'm not a fish. I don't know what's going on for the fish, right? So I hold that with some humility. I hold that with some care, right? And same for other people, not just fishes, but same for other people. That I leave room for not knowing what their experience is. So this practice, though, this practice of compassion, of attending to suffering or attending to difficulty, is a big one. It's a big job. And in Buddhism, we have developed this very big being to represent that practice. And their name is Avalokiteshvara, or also known as Guanyin in Chinese, or Kannon in Japanese, or Chenrezig in Tibetan, and so on. And it's kind of the face that we put on the quality or the activity of compassion. And there are several of them here around the vihara. And that being, I believe, is first described in chapter 24 or chapter 25, depending on which interpretation, which translation of the Lotus Sutra, the Dhamma Buddhist Sutta. Dhamma Buddhist. It's Lotus Sutra is one of the early Mahayana suttas, so probably roughly around 1st century, 2nd century of the Common Era is when it was written down. It had probably been around for some time at that point already. And in this chapter, it describes this very powerful bodhisattva. So what is a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is an awakening being. That's the literal translation of what that means. Bodhi is awakening, and sattva is being. That's Sanskrit, by the way, not Pali. Most of the Mahayana sutras are in Sanskrit, and most of the Theravada or the early Buddhist sutras are in Pali. So Avalokiteshvara is described in this chapter, and I brought the chapter with me because it's described as this very, very powerful being who responds to. So that name, Avalokiteshvara, can be translated as one who hears the sounds of the world. Or it also can be translated more literally as one who looks down on the world, because Avalokiteshvara is understood to be a being that could observe the whole world. And it's described this way. as like a savior. If one were carried off by a great river and called upon the Bodhisattva's name, then straight away they would find a shallow place. So this is the Hurwitz translation. It's a very good one. I like the Hurwitz. There are many, many, many translations. Or if one is about to be murdered, one would call out to the Bodhisattva and thus gain deliverance, because the knives of the other fellow would be broken into pieces. Or if one is about to be executed, one would call upon the name of the Bodhisattva. And merchants, when merchants were traveling, they would proclaim the Bodhisattva's name. So we hear this kind of a teaching, and you can take that quite literally, you can take that kind of devotionally. And many people do. People travel around with Avalokiteshvaras in their wallets and in their cars. I have an Avalokiteshvara in my car, not because I think that she's preventing accidents, however, but it's kind of interesting, this description of what is the capacity to respond, right? The capacity to respond again and again to the mundane difficulties of life. And so one way to depict the Bodhisattva is the thousand-armed version. The thousand-armed version. So she has, and I say she, but Avalokiteshvara actually appears in all the many genders, sometimes masculine, sometimes feminine, sometimes very neutral. And that's also the capacity to respond, to be as needed for the care that needs to be provided. But anyway, she gets depicted with 1,000 arms, and in each one of those arms, she has an eye for seeing, and she has an implement, oftentimes, some kind of implement. Sometimes a stick, and sometimes a feather, and sometimes a book, and sometimes other kinds of implements, a bow and arrow, etc. And maybe you've seen that people do actual shows of the Bodhisattva of 1,000 arms, right? So there's like one person in the front, and there's a whole stack of people standing directly behind them, such that you can't see the folks behind them, and you can only see them and they move their arms. It's fascinating when they do that. I really like that. But to get back to my point, so why? What is this? What does this mean? What I want to suggest is, as I said, Avalokiteshvara as a face is a way that we can begin to relate to this quality. But what this teaching is about is that we are each Avalokiteshvara. We are each Kanon. We are each Guanyin. We are the ones that when someone calls out for help, we will respond. Or when someone is sick, we take care of them. Or when we see some kind of suffering, we attend to it in our own heart. We are the ones who enact the Bodhisattva. That's what it means. That's what it means. That we are them. We are her hands. We are her hands, doing that great activity in the world for ourselves and for others. That is the practice of compassion, the practice of response. And as I said, it's a pretty big job. It's a pretty big job. We don't have to do it all, but nonetheless, it is a pretty big job to take care of suffering as best you can. And so one matter, or one issue that we need to address if we're going to take on this kind of practice is how to hear suffering, how to be aware of suffering in the world and attend to it without being overwhelmed. Because that's the danger, right? That's the danger. Because the world is unresolved. That's one of the ways, that's one of the definitions of dukkha. The world is unresolved. There will never be a day when we are completely done taking care of suffering, right? If that is what we have committed to do. There will never be a day when the world is completely without any suffering. In fact, attending to that point a little bit, we have the Buddha in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Connected Discourses. The Buddha speaks about what he has seen as a Buddha. And he says, monastics, this samsara, or samsara is not a place, samsara is our, you could say, karmic manifestations, the realm of our karmic manifestations, is without discoverable beginning. A first point cannot be discerned of beings roaming about and wandering, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Just as a stick thrown in the air falls now on its bottom or on its side or on its top, meaning it just falls in one way or another, so too beings do that. They wander on, hindered by ignorance or fettered by craving. And they do this. Things that lead to suffering. So how to attend to this? How to really take care of this without being overwhelmed? What I want to suggest is that you can't really take up this practice unless you're going to find the joy in it. Unless you're going to find the joy in the activity itself, without the goal of the end, just finding the joy in the activity itself. Mm? So I'll tell you a little story about a fish. This happened a long time ago. I was at Tassajara Monastery. It was New Year's Day, but it does, because of where it is in the world, there's not a lot of snow. It's a little cold, but it's not any snow or anything. So I was going on a hike on New Year's Day. It was bright and sunny. I went on a little bit of a hike up the ridge. I happened to be by myself that day. And I walked up the ridge and I wanted to go by the creek. Tassajara is named after the creek there. And I got to the creek and I was standing there. And as I was standing there, hop, 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 this little fish hopped out of the creek onto the stone where I was standing. Very small little fish, like a couple inches long at most. And I noticed the little fish, and then I was sort of still looking around and such. And it took me a minute to realize that the little fish hadn't hopped back in the water. It was still there on the stone by my foot. And I thought, oh no, I'm gonna have to help the little fish get back in the water, because he can't back it. She can't get back in. So I bent over and I tried to pick up the little fish and put it back in the water. Well, no, the fish is not having any of that, right? It's just squirming and squirming. And I'm afraid to squeeze it too hard, right? Because if I harm it, then what's the point of putting the thing back? So I'm trying to get the fish, and the fish is not letting me help it back in the water. And by this time now, its little mouth is open and it's gasping for air. And I'm thinking, oh no, I really have to figure out how to help this little fish. So I stopped for a second, stood up, I stopped for a second, and I thought to myself, okay, fish need water. He needs to go back in the water. Fish need water. And then I got that idea. Oh, great. So I scooped up a little bit of water, swished it over the fish, scooping the fish right back into the river. Yay! A happy moment for me and a happy moment for the fish. Right? And there are a lot of lessons that came out of that. Not the least of which is that even though I'm arguably smarter than the fish, more powerful than the fish, understand the situation a little bit better than the fish, I cannot help until I have some empathy with the fish. I cannot help until I have some empathy, some understanding of what's going on for the fish. And the second lesson is the joy, right? That I have to find the joy in it. If I'm going to take up this path of putting the fish back in the creek every time that I can. I have to find the joy in it. When I was a chaplain in the hospital, it's very common to talk about burnout, right? Or different ways in which people's compassion gets tired. And time again, that would be the thing that would help. We would talk to people, we would do various kinds of rituals and various kinds of events. But ultimately, they have to find the thing that made them happy, that made them motivated to feel good about helping. And then they can go on. They can continue helping. Even if it's not the end, even if it doesn't bring the end. And the wisdom, to go back to this, the wisdom of this is deeply embedded in the practice of it, because it is also our interdependence there. That I know that my well-being, my joy, is also tied up in not letting the little fish die if I can help it. Right? That I understand that interdependence there. That too is the wisdom of compassion. So wisdom and compassion go together. Sometimes we hear, and I'm going to wrap it up here soon, sometimes we hear about, especially in Zen, we hear about the so-called idiot compassion. I really, really dislike that term. I really, really dislike this term. There is no such thing as idiot compassion. There can be compassion which is limited, a compassion which is trying to help an immediate kind of suffering and isn't really seeing the big picture. That's true. That happens quite often, that we don't know well how to help. But that is not idiocy. That is just a matter of trial and error. That is a matter of doing what we can to the extent that we can, and then learning from that. So I really encourage you to think about compassion in this way, that every small act of compassion can bring you joy and can teach you wisdom. Even in a world that is going to keep on suffering. Compassion makes a difference. Compassion is wisdom enacted. Okay, friends, so now we have a good long time, half an hour almost, for comments, questions, reflections? Anything about the meditation or about the Dhamma talk? Yes, Stig, and then Brad.
It's interesting for me. I thought you were going to jump into Manjushri, but then I realized that Manjushri needs more compassion. And there is that compassion with Manjushri, but it's not realized until one is really experiencing what you're talking about.
Mm.
So it was just a very powerful talk. And the other memory I had was that the last time I heard the fish story, I've heard it before, I was thinking of skillful, unskillful, which I think of as trying to figure things out from a rational perspective without opening up the door of empathy and getting into the fish world or the human world, other human world. I mean, it translates, I think, in that sense. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful teaching, I think, of the balance between wisdom and compassion and the icons of what they represent. And for me, a new representation for Manjushri. That was a huge opening. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Stig. Thank you. So Manjushri that he's mentioning is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, just so that you know, so that there are said to be different bodhisattvas that emphasize different qualities, and Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom. And Manjushri is usually depicted with a sword, this huge sword to cut off your delusions. And that's why Stig is saying, no, right, compassion as wisdom, it has this beautiful way of actually understanding wisdom doesn't have to be something that hurts like a sword. Wisdom is actually much more than that. Yes, so Brad and then Chaya.
Yeah, so I'm reading for the second time a couple of Venerable Analayo Bhikku's books. I came across this one passage in, I think it's in Abiding in Emptiness or Signless and the Deathless, I'm not sure which, probably Abiding in Emptiness. And he says that he uses the term emptiness, but he's talking about wisdom, he's talking about insight. He said, emptiness without metta, without compassion, kindness, and metta, is either barren or toxic. And it's not an optional practice. if you don't have some, if all you're trying to do is get more enlightened or more insight, and you're completely ignoring, whether you're cultivating the heart qualities, that's worse than just a one-sided practice. I mean, it can actually hurt yourself and hurt other people. And I've certainly seen that myself. And even in the Zen lineage that I was in, we didn't do metta practice until there was like major crises. And then all of a sudden we started doing metta practice. We all, teachers and students, all realized how essential it was. It's not an optional side issue. So I just thought I'd share that.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Brad. Yes. Yeah, it calls to mind your reflection there. Really calls to mind also the Buddha's own path, right? I mean, he goes exactly to this aspect of, driving into this very dry and harsh kind of way that he thought wisdom would arise. And it wasn't until he acknowledged, no, I need to nourish my body. I need to find some joy. I need to sit under the shade of a tree, that he was able to actually begin to incorporate. When he was able to incorporate compassion into his own life, that's when his path actually opened to the path of awakening and not just the path of asceticism. Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah.
As you were speaking, giving the Dharma talk, you spoke about the one that has the many arms.
Yes.
And that really, I loved that. Not that I haven't seen that before, but it made me realize the point that if we are she, and the image you gave of the many in the like videos or whatever, with their arms, like each of us is one of those pairs of arms. So sometimes we avoid opening to compassion because it's scary, because there's just so much suffering, it's unlimited. And if you realize that you are just one of those pairs of arms, it makes it a little less fearful. We each find the way we can be compassionate, and maybe grow in our limits, but like, I'm not responsible for the whole thing. I'm responsible for this set of arms.
Yes, beautiful reflection. Yes. Did everybody hear what Chai was saying a little bit? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, that's lovely. Exactly. Yeah. We do our part, and because of interconnectedness, then our part matters, and yeah, we can approach that very, very big job. Yeah. Yes, Julia.
Sorry. I put together some years ago, I was at a UU church, and their young people, teens, preteens and teens, had studied different religions, philosophies, faith, using the broad term. And one of the things that they did is they used several sayings that Westerners are familiar with. And they went down the line. Each young person gave that religion's variation on what it said.
Okay.
The only one that was different, they all were some version of "do unto others as you would do unto
Have
you."
done unto yourself.
Yes. I've gotten away from that one. But the Buddhism one said, "Do unto others as they would be done unto," which to me translates as wisdom. And the fish.
Exactly.
To do what I would need to sit on the rock, right? But I've seen it play out a lot with children when they're buying gifts for somebody, and very young children will buy something they like, right? And I've seen some adults do the same thing, but that really stood out to me because it made a lot of sense to me. And but that takes wisdom.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful reflection. Yes, Julia. Exactly. That we are really aiming to, better attend to what others need, and know that is in some way related to what we need, but really, it's going to be their own. It's going to be their own way of seeing it. Yeah. Yeah. And it was exactly like that with the fish, right? It's like I have to think like a fish a little bit before it will actually happen. Wonderful. Yeah, the role of empathy, I cannot overemphasize the role of empathy. In fact, I didn't want to get into the whole scheme of the Brahma Viharas, but if we think about the four immeasurables, right? Loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. This is also, again, this whole practice of compassion. This is what we're talking about here. In a way, you could say all four of those things are related and are ways that are qualities that we need in order to enact our compassion. We need to find the kindness. We need to find that empathetic joy in the moment. We need to find our equanimity, our ability to kind of swim in the midst of all this. Yes, Deborah.
Thank you once again. And for the fish again, that's it's good to see that little fish. It's making me reflect on activism and the public square, and that combination of wisdom and compassion and right speech as reflected in right writing in a way, and how important it is in one's own work or in the work that we read to or that's being put out there, to see that combination of wisdom and compassion. It's the most effective force for change, I think. And that's, I've learned so much about this over the past 8 years or so, about how writing without really seeing the other side and reflecting that you see it is much less effective in trying to produce change. And it's reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a big red flag, right? If we are involved in social justice in whatever way or social action, if we start to lose our empathy, that's a big red flag. That's when we should really stop and say, hold on, you know, what methods are we using here? Or what understanding is missing, you know? Or I think about also tangentially related perhaps is Nelson Mandela coming out of 27 years of being in prison and saying, if I didn't let go of my anger, then I would still be in prison. When I leave this place, I know that I need to let go of my anger, because otherwise I'm the one that's in prison. So he didn't take that approach when he became a leader in the country. You know, he understood that he couldn't lead from the place of anger.
And isn't the Dalai Lama the reincarnation of Avita?
Right. The Dalai Lama is said to be the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara. But as I would say, we're all her, if we are all her when we take up the practice. But yes, that is the Tibetan understanding of his role. Yes. Wise and compassionate leadership. We hope we can support that. All right, friends, we have arrived at the, oh, sorry, Brad. Okay. I think I'm going to let Dana go ahead and make the announcement. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, actually, no, we have more time. It's 10:45. Oh, Brad, please. See, even I am not ready for the new schedule.
That's what I thought. I looked at the time and no, anyway.
No, you got it. You got it, please.
So this is not a fish story. This is a rock story. Yesterday, I went to a place called Stone Paradise, not Stone Paradise with a D, to buy some rockery stone for a new Canone garden that I'm working on. And come out the door with the salesman, and out of nowhere, he starts saying, yeah, every few years people say, yeah, the world is ending, and yeah, it's so bad, and we did it after 9/11. We did the first Trump presidency. We're doing it now, the second Trump. And he's on like this, and out of my mouth came, the world is always ending. And he stopped, and he turned to me and he said, and then I said something about, for some people, it's coming soon, or it's happening right now. And he said, my wife just had a brain tumor removed from the base of her skull. And then we're standing there amongst all the rockery stone for a good 20 minutes, half an hour, just talking. And so, you know, like everyone we meet, you know, people say, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Well, are you really? You know, okay. You know, not to be intrusive, but just to hold the space for that to happen. Anyway, so I told my wife that finally found my chaplaincy, which is to go up to complete strangers and ask them
And say
about
the world is ending. Before long, we're going to see you in San Francisco with a big sign.
the end is near.
No, that's a beautiful story. And yes, you know, it just speaks to people are telling us in different ways, right? People are telling us in different ways that they're hurting or that they're worried or that they're aware of suffering. Yes, Richard, please.
Could you comment on the idea of just listening? It can be an act of compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in a sense, our quiet but attentive listening can open up a safe space for people to express themselves. That, you know, it's kind of subtle when that happens. There needs to be a sort of explicit permission, I find, that even if we are doing a good job of listening, there may not be that safe space created, or there may not be that sense of ability to open up, to say something, until, you know, there is some way in which, just like Brad was saying, like at first you're talking about stones or you're talking about politics or whatever, and then there can be a kind of shift where there's a clear, explicit ability to talk about something else. So, you know, one of the things that's very cool about chaplaincy is that explicit permission is kind of obvious, it's requested. You step in the door and somebody either lets you in the room or they don't, or you step in the door and you start to have a conversation and they either let you in or they don't. And it's like that. But in everyday life, we can kind of see that whether that door is open or it needs a minute. But once that safe space is established, then, you know, to receive what's really true for someone else is a tremendous honor. It's really a beautiful honor, and it's really something to be handled with care. Like I think about like some precious egg or something, you know, that somebody hands you their feeling or their story or their perception. No matter whether you agree or not, or you think, you know, it's skillful or not, or any of that stuff. Sometimes it doesn't look like a precious egg. Sometimes it looks like somebody being really angry, you know? But that, to be able to receive it is a very, very beautiful practice. And I say receive in the sense of just to attend to be present for somebody else's expression. I think we have to be very careful not to receive it as in to take it on as our own experience necessarily, right? So there's that beautiful story about the Buddha where the Brahmin comes and cusses him out because he's upset that the Buddha had ordained his nephew, who was supposed to go on and be a Brahmin. The Brahmins are passed down within the family. That role, that spiritual care role, that's what the Brahmins were, you know, and they do like fire ceremonies and sacrifices and things. But the Brahmin comes, he cusses the Buddha out. The Buddha waits for him to finish, right? And then he asks him a series of questions by which he finally concludes by saying, right, I will not receive the gift of your anger. I see that you're angry, and I'm not going to receive the gift of your anger. So he listened, he acknowledges what's there, but he also says, I'm not going to take that on from you. And that's also a very important practice. We don't always have to be so explicit about it, but I think if you're going to practice deep listening well, and over time, and really hear lots of things that may strike you in various ways that are hard, you have to learn how to let that be their expression. And that's a beautiful thing. I can hold your expression as your expression and know the difference. No? I don't know if that's where you wanted to go with that, Richard.
No, that's it really is. And that when you listen, I think you need to be, it's kind of like being on the cushion. It's kind of like you have thoughts come up, judgments come up, you just let them go, and you just be kind of an empty space for that person to express their story, their suffering,
Yeah.
and with an open heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful because we learn something when we put our feelings, when we express our feelings in some way. We always learn something about it, right? If you have to learn how to put it into words and what it is you want to say about it and what you are asserting is true or not true, you know? So I think we often learn something very important just by stating what's going on in our inner world. You know, it's not an end all be all for sure, you know. Otherwise, then psychotherapy would be equivalent to enlightenment, but it's not.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk today, too.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah. Other thoughts? Anything on the meditation? This is a little different one. You know, I like to experiment. I like to do them differently so y'all don't get lazy or bored or whatever happens if it's monotonous and the same every time. Yeah, got a thumbs up? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Some people like the elements and some people find them hard to relate to. So, yeah. All right. Anything more? Okay, Dana, now it's really, oh, wait, Stig's got one more thing to say.
If I can unmute here, I found it. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm just very intrigued by Richard's question because I think there's, in the act of listening, there's also some risk-taking involved. For example, let's say I'm into the mode of listening to learn and to empathize, but I've got some other compelling thing to do. And maybe the conversation of the listening can go further if I can find another question or intervene with a question to get closer to maybe what's actually behind the full potpourri of expression that's coming from the person. And so there, to me, that's a very tough space to find that. But the empathy piece, coming back to the empathy, I think is a way of further informing, well, what could be the next question? Or what could be an additional question? So that's an iterative kind of process, I think, the listening and speaking, and I am still working on that big time. It's a great pathway, I think, for further discovery. Just working with that conundrum, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree, Stig. That's a beautiful exploration, and it's a very subtle one. And you know, I think of that kind of conversation sometimes as like, how am I helping someone to give birth to some understanding or some new expression or something that might not have otherwise come forth, right? Without me defining what that is. And that's the subtlety in there, right? Is the kind of not to be leading the witness.
Yeah, the other piece of, for me, is just the preciousness of Sangha for helping understand the vastly different worlds we all live in and how we all relating to your talk, for example. It brings in this, it brings in that, and it's broadening the whole expression of our understanding of who we are, you know, so different yet so common at the same sense, in the same sense. Just really deepening the appreciation of Sangha big time. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think on that note, then we are ready for the announcement finally. Thank you. Thanks, Stig. That's beautiful reflection. I appreciate that. I also really appreciate the expressions of Sangha and people talking about all the different ways that they're practicing with these beautiful teachings.
Yes. Well, maybe I'll begin with saying I'm so grateful for this community, people here and not here, who support Dassanaya, because it's your support that makes it all happen. And to continue, giving to Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadīpā, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages on the website, under the support tab, donate, volunteer, or offer materials, give you ways of doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dana. And yes, thanks to everyone for your presence, your practice, your beautiful support of each other and of me. And may, and the little heart. May the merits, the beneficial karmic momentum and karmic results that we have set into motion by our practice here today, may they be a cause and a condition for all beings to find compassion in their hearts and to know the wisdom of care, the wisdom of empathy, the wisdom of the truth of it, our connectedness. By the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma and the Sangha, and each one's efforts, may all beings be free. Okay, bye-bye everyone. Tea and cookies for the folks who want to stay. Bye.